Hello, everyone. I'd just like to welcome you to today's webinar. We'll be spending the next hour learning more about our brand new program, Purposeful Conversations. This course is so very relevant as everything stems from a conversation. We would love to learn where you are joining us from today, so please comment in the chat your location. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. I'd like to draw your attention to the Q&A button. As questions come up for you during the session, please put them there and we'll have time at the end for questions. Remember to post chat to everyone, not just panelists, so we can all see your comments and or questions. We will be using the chat for engagement throughout the webinar. You may have already seen this, but here's a little bit more from Merv as he talks about this program.
Hello, my name is Merv Rogers. I'm the Chief Coaching Officer for Coaching Out of the Box, and I'm here to talk about purposeful conversations, and we've called that on purpose because what we realize is that there's really two styles of communication in every conversation, and that's the asking style, the style that engages people, that develops people, that encourages people. We call that the coaching style, right? There's also, however, the telling style, which is really what a manager might do, or an influencer, or a salesperson, or somebody who has to be outbound in terms of the information. Coaching tends to be inbound in terms of the information. And so in one course, we decided to put both of those communication styles into one, because in every conversation, you need both. What that allows managers to do, or people who are program leading, influencing, it's not about direct reports. It's about your requirement to provide the criteria for success or information, and then the requirement for getting people engaged in it. It's like the executive who walked up to the front of the room in front of his organization and her organization and said, hey, we've got this great vision. We're going to be number one, and we're going to do this, and then walks off stage. And it doesn't happen. Oh, surprise. Why not? Because there's no accountability, ownership passed to the audience. What this program does is explain very succinctly. Yeah, go back on stage, walk up, make sure that everyone understands what's the requirement for success. What are we trying to achieve? What's the vision? What's the purpose? What's the minimum requirement? Whatever it is, be very good at that. Be very good at telling, and step over to the coaching side and invite people to have. So what does that mean to you? What does that mean to you in your sales territory? What does that mean to you and your people? How are you now going to implement that? What are the kinds of things that you now can do to make that vision that I talked about on stage really work well? That's the purposeful conversation. And in that purposeful conversation, we've communicated the requirements for success. We've absolutely helped the individual step into it, get engaged and bought into the idea, and they have walked away with accountability and responsibility. That rocks. That's what purposeful conversation is.
So I'd like to introduce you to our Chief Operations Officer, Pablo. Pablo, would you like to come on and say hi?
Yes, hi, Stephanie. Thank you very much. Hi, Merv. Hi, hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to meet every one of you, and thank you for taking the time to be with us today. I am the Chief Operating Officer of Coaching Out of the Box, and I pretty much make sure that everything's ticking along, and yeah, that's a little bit about me.
And you tick along quite well, Pablo. That's very good. So you and I are here to talk about purposeful conversations. The gang kind of saw that video, and you can see, I hope you could see I'm rather passionate about this. So where do we start?
Well, let me just give, so Coaching Out of the Box traditionally has been basically teaching coaches how to be coaches, right? And we've been doing this for over 15 years. We've trained over 30,000 students approximately, and they've gone through our programs, and we've done this very, very well. So can you share with us, how did Purposeful Conversations kind of come to be?
Yeah, I will. I mean, it comes from a practical necessity. We've been asked over the years many, many times to go inside organizations and teach those managers, or help those managers adopt more of a coaching style. And what gets obvious that when you're in those environments is they're not coaches, they're managers, they're leaders, they're influencers, they're whatever they are, they have other job roles. And so what we found is that when we start taking the powerful stuff that that coaches use in terms of their ability to have conversations and get development and so forth, and integrate that into other job roles, that's what has been working very well for us, right? And so the passion is just to bring this out to other organizations and have other people bring that out as well. And that's why we're coming more public with it. But it's been in place for a long time. And the real shift for me was realizing that what coaches do with their ability to, have a conversation, their ability to have what we would call a coach engagement, if we just take that and simply focus it on the conversations. I can remember many years ago working with a senior leadership team, and lots of problems in the company perhaps, but the bottom line was they said, we just want our managers or our people to talk to each other a lot easier. Bottom line. And that's what this does. It's about having a conversation. So we've taken a variety of things. And in fact, maybe what I'll do, Paolo, is I'll show you some of the shifts we've taken then from, thinking pure coaching into this blended, integrated world of ours. The real premise says that in everything we do, we really have just two communication styles. And those communication styles are either you're asking or you're telling. And what we mean by telling was it wasn't just, manager reporting to an employee and backwards. It's about those job roles where informing is required or influencing is required or feedback is required. Maybe you're a project manager and you've got to lead a team. They may not report to you, but they still look to you to go for guidance. So that's what we're calling the telling or the managing style of communication. The opposite side, the asking style of communication, that's going to be those folks that, when you're doing development, conversations, all of those kinds of conversations that managers, consultants, therapists even use. That's what we're talking about, the coaching side. So those are the two dimensions, is managing, which is telling, and coaching, which is the asking. And all of the roles that are in between. And this was the sweet spot. This says, when you take a look at those roles, you realize that it's a varying combination of those two extremes. A manager tends to be more telling, a coach tends to be more asking, but a consultant is kind of both. And a mentor, it does tell, but encourages people to step into their strength and to their skills, right? And so we really come from this premise that back away from the word coaching and really talk about, hey, let's get really brilliant at telling. Let's get absolutely brilliant at asking and doing that in one conversation, right? So what we did is we took the basic model of the coaching 555, which has been powerful for many years now, and we said, let's instead of calling it the coaching exchange, which is what a coach would use, the process to have a coaching conversation. Why not just call it a process for conversation, right? And see, a coach would identify what the topic they want to talk about, and a coach would help a colleague develop, the options, the ideas, and a coach would help somebody strategize in terms of what the action plans are, what the individual needs to do next as a result of the conversation they've had. And a coach is going to absolutely make sure to what's the barriers? What's getting in the way of their action plan? That's what a coach does. And a coach is always going to have the other individual recap. Well, we can apply the same thing to any conversation. I mean, literally any conversation, whether that's a conversation with your kids to pick up their shoes from, when you get home at the day or do their homework, or, your dry cleaner or whoever it is. We can actually use the same process to have every conversation. There's a slight modification like that first one. You know, when you're in the manager mode or you're in influence mode, you kind of have a shared agenda, right? The manager has the agenda and the coach has it, or the colleague has an agenda. And so we kind of say, well, you know, what if we identified both agendas right up front? What do you want to talk about? What do I want to talk about? Let's talk about it. Let's get very clear right up front. I will tell you, in my years of IBM, we would spend 25 minutes, literally 25 minutes in a meeting, just doing agenda bouncing. What are we here for? What do you want to talk about? This is important to me. And you know, there's all sorts of mixed agendas sitting in the room, and you spend forever sorting through them. Wouldn't it be really cool at the beginning of every meeting or every conversation, say, look, we got an hour together, team. What do we want to make sure we cover today? What do we want to walk away with today? Just really succinct. That's what step one's all about. And so it saves like 25 minutes of this, you know, agenda bouncing around, right? And so we're in the course, we talk about from a conversation perspective, how to implement these 5 steps in just about every conversation you have. And then we go back to the coaching. We say, okay, so what do they know that we could apply to a manager or to an influencer or a consultant, or, you know, to all of those job roles? Well, we do know, without question, every one of those job roles needs to listen even more effectively. Some of them do it well. Some of them could do it better. There's a lot of managers I work for that could really do it better. Questioning is a powerful thing. Lots of times people ask questions that really have the answer in the question, which is not a huge value of our time. The ability to support and encourage people, and the ability to have help others provide action planning. All of those skills are going to be in this course as well, because all of those apply to whatever job role you have. Also, what applies to those are basic leadership skills, such as the ones you see on the right-hand side. We happen to call them in the coaching world guiding principles for coaching, but in truth, they're just leadership skills, right? A powerful leader is curious. A powerful leader is curious about the market, curious about their employee, curious about the budget, curious about their P&L. They become curious, and that curiosity, you know, drives things forward, causes growth. They're accepting of what we've got and what we've got to work with, and they move on. So all of these particular skills are great. I will say one thing that was really noticeable in every one of the courses we have is one thing that happens is every single person that comes into a course is brilliant at problem solving. And that is the one thing that we have to untrain. A problem solver is great at getting what, you know, their goals very, very clear. They've got some vested interest because they're solving the problem. They're looking for the outcomes, right? They've got a lot of things involved that helps them solve the solution. Well, if we are, say, in a manager mode and we're solving all the solutions, then the solution's only going to be as good as my experience and my knowledge. And therefore, I'm not taking advantage of somebody else's experience or somebody else's knowledge. And that's what we want to do. So what we say to the folks is, listen, let's add to this the coaching mindset. And the coaching mindset says there's times to problem solve, and yet there's also time to help the other individual get very clear with what they're trying to achieve. There's also times to make them or allow them to own their own solution. And what's really, really cool, and you saw me here in the video, and I'll promise I end with it. This idea of letting go of problem solving and moving to empower and enable the other individual's brilliance and intelligence and ownership absolutely transfers accountability. At the end of the conversation, it's about the other person walking away with the to-dos, not the manager, because that's the old style. The old style was the manager would command and control, tell you what to do, this, that, limit themselves to their own kind of perspective, where now we're going to bring it into the other person because they're knowledge workers nowadays, right, folks? We need to leverage their experience. So we had a little theme that we started out many years ago, and it said, you know, you got to coach the person, not the problem. And that's really what we're drawing this distinction, is that when you're using a purposeful conversation, you're really coaching the other person to be more powerful in the situation that exists for them. You're really using those coaching skills to allow that individual to have the courage, the insight, the knowledge, the awareness, whatever it is, whatever it takes to really go forward and make a difference, versus just following the 5 steps that you told them to do. Right? And so problem solving is a big thing that we decommission people with. To draw some distinctions also in the course, this is one of the charts that hopefully makes a lot of sense when we talk about the difference between the manager, the telling role, and the asking role, the coach. The manager's role is to kind of set the sandbox to play in. You know, the manager's role, whether you're a program manager, whether you're a consultant, whatever it is, you set the boundaries for the work effort. You set the boundaries for the work, the procedures, the project. In other words, you define the policies, procedures, the measurements, the expected outcomes, the timelines. Now, somebody needs to do that and do that really, really well. And that's the role of the manager. But once we define, the requirements, once we define what's required, then we let this coaching thing take over. And that could be as simple as, like the sales example I did in the video. You need to explain to your people. I did this for years. I would stand up in front of my folks and say, look, guys, welcome to January. This is, it's our big sales conference. Our targets are up by 10%. Woohoo, let's go for it. Right. And so I defined the criteria. And then, of course, the next year I stood up in front of them and said, whoa, guess what? Our targets are 12% this year. Aren't we all excited? But I didn't give them any power to change or influence things. And what this little diagram is trying to suggest to you is that what we want to do is be able to set the parameters of, hey, folks, the targets have gone up 10% this year. And so what does that mean to your world? And that's what I mean by we slide into coaching. We now become curious. We now become accepting of the world. Before, I used to have debates for months with my sales guys around 10%, Merv? No, we can't do 10%. We can do 8.5. I can do 8.5, but not 10%. Those targets aren't negotiable, and yet we tend to negotiate them all year long. Now, a good teller tells and declares what the requirement for success looks like, what the criteria is. And a fabulous manager coach then takes that and says, so what is the organization going to do with that? Which one of the divisions are able to stand up and take on the excessive targets so that the others can win, right? And so we really want to have that balance. So that's one thing we talked about. So we're drifting. What we're doing, Pablo, is we're taking coaching methodologies and instilling it into real life roles, right? Into manager roles, people that tell, influencer roles, all that sort of stuff. Here's a little more, and I'll just show it to you. You can see the difference between what we call the manager role. They're very objectives and performance based, and the coach is all about development. And again, when you get that dance really well, it can work exceptionally well. So that's what we cover for sure. There is a perspective. My coach colleagues wouldn't agree with this, because I think some of my coach colleagues believe that you can coach anything, and maybe I'm making fun of them, but sometimes you gotta tell, and you can be a master of coaching to provide people perspective, give them awareness, help them understand what their priorities are, which is fabulous. But you also sometimes need to give people strong feedback. And what we noticed that in these same groups, that when they first, when they got this idea that it's a process to have a conversation, and they got this idea that if they strengthen selected skills, that they can in fact be more powerful in that conversation. Then we say, well, what we noticed is they weren't able to provide feedback very well. They didn't have a lot of courage to provide feedback. Oftentimes people will call that the difficult conversation. I have problems with a difficult conversation. Well, I guess there are some difficult conversations because they're challenging, but I don't think the process to have a difficult conversation is that hard. It's got 5 steps in it. And there's a technique that we share, and there's lots of techniques out there. This is the one that we find is very simple. And the technique for providing feedback simply says, listen, the first you want to do is, do this. ask for feedback, provide specific observed behavior, communicate that feedback and request. And so it's a simple process, but what we try to do in this course is to really make sure that the people get even better at telling. See, the old telling, the old style of feedback tended to be kind of nicey. We didn't want to hurt their feelings. We didn't want to say too much in case they leave the company, right? And so what we really kind of wanted to get into is kind of hope that they would listen to us. I call that the mushy manager, the one that kind of says, well, wouldn't it be wiser if you didn't maybe swear in front of the customer? What do you think? Would that be something you could do? And so I make fun of that, but that's kind of that's the language we use, where we want to provide feedback, and we want to provide feedback that simply says it's unacceptable for any of my employees to swear in front of a customer. Unacceptable. End of story. That's the rules. That's the policy. But I can't do that because I leave them bleeding all over the floor. And so I got to kind of pick them up with the coaching side and say, so what does that mean for you? What else are you going to do about that? What were some of the reasons that you used that particular language with the customer, right? Whatever it is. I don't know why I'm sticking on swearing in front of customers, but let's say that that's a marvelous example. But this would be one of the techniques that we use, right? Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
I'll give you a real life example. I'll give you a real life example where one of the recent, I'll call them students, I guess, worked at a call center. So they came to the day and said, look, I got this individual, and 3 days in a row, they were not ready to go at 8:30 in the morning. And we want all of our agents ready to go to do the online chat at 8:30 because that's our highest volume. We're all measured on quality stats. I need everybody in their chairs, fingers ready, and off to go at 8:30. And they were going to give feedback to this individual about this fact that they were not ready to go at 8:30. And so we role played it. And I said, so how would you do it? How would the old you do it? And the old you would say, well, listen, you weren't at your desk. Why are you so late? For 3 days in a row, you've been late. And what we find is that during feedback, if we also offer some level of judgment, in other words, I label it as being late, my interpretation of their behavior, we end up arguing about that behavior. So we recrafted how they were going to operate. And so the second step that we talk about is giving very specific observed behavior. And what we mean by that is this individual could simply say, listen, I'm the manager speaking now. Listen, one of the things I've noticed is 3 days in a row at 8:30, you weren't in your particular chair. So that's the telling sound. Can you tell me what's going on? And as this conversation evolved, the manager's perspective was that they were going to fire this guy. They were going to get rid of him because they're obviously, he doesn't care about his job. He doesn't show up on time. That was the mentality of the manager at the time. Where now you get the story. And the story was that individual was helping another brand new employee get ready, get set up and ready to go at 8:30. And they were doing that 3 mornings in a row on their own, own good. And so all of a sudden what could have been a confronting kind of conversation became a very informed conversation. And that's what we think is purposeful conversations, that ability to be really, really informed, right?
Absolutely.
What else?
As you're saying, just very, very quickly, Merv, as you're saying that it goes back to the connection that you have with that individual versus just as a manager saying, this is what you do, versus blaming. It's actually taking the time to find out exactly, what's going on with that person. And that's the way to actually get people to do the things that not that you would like them to do that stuff. That doesn't sound right.
I think you're absolutely right. And what I feel coaching does to that manager role is gives them that humanity, gives them that ability gives that person the tools to have that empathetic conversation, but not get lost in it, not get lost in, oh, I know it's real tough, isn't it? Not get get lost on the sympathetic side, but have very clear boundaries, but be able to work with the individual to either meet those boundaries or understand why those boundaries aren't going to be met, right? And so anyway, so that's one thing we cover. What else do we cover, you ask? Oh, this is what we do cover. Oh, let me show you this slide. I love this slide. I love this slide because people are kind of going, what? I was brought up, I was trained by some masters, whether it be Xerox or IBM, and we were told about the Oreo cookie feedback model. That means you give them good news, you hit them in the eyes, and then you give them good news at the end. You're doing a great job, but I really don't like the shirt you're wearing today, but you're doing a great job. And so that Oreo cookie or that sandwich, it doesn't work. It really doesn't work. This was a study that was done, and you know, and an article was written on the study, and you can read it as well as I can, but it confuses employees. And it also disadvantages the manager or the influencer or the communicator. It doesn't have to have a hierarchy here. But when I'm going to my kids, or I'm going to my boss, or I'm going to somebody who said, you did a really good job, they're conditioned to wait for the other shoe to drop. But, right? And so they didn't hear the first part. The but takes away all of the first part. And now what we do is we train them to hear or get ready for a fight whenever I say something positive. And that doesn't serve anyone well at all, right? So we really try to get rid of, you know, this problem-solving technique in the sandwich feedback idea because, well, it's not tasty. And that's why we use this particular process. What we know is that there are moments to tell and there are moments to ask, and we need to do that in one conversation. And that's the trick. That's kind of where the practice part of this particular experience comes in. Because it's one thing to know that you can tell very well because you have the feedback process to talk about. And it's another thing that you can ask very well because you have the coaching process to talk about. But now you're into one conversation that has both. You know, you're going to do both. So this is the eloquence, is to know when to coach and when to tell, when to coach and when to manage. And that secret sauce will be different. That set point will be different for everyone's job role. So everyone needs to find a kind of their point. But even in the most training environment where telling is obvious, you know, outbound is you know, the way in which training happens. There are moments to listen. There are moments to ask and seek and engage, right? And so it's actually knowing when those moments go. So this is about, you know, taking into one conversation, doing this, well, we call it the manager-coach dance. This dance between asking and telling, going back and forth, right? Here's a scenario maybe where, oh, we might have been working with somebody who asked a question, you know, because it's not always, they don't always come to the manager, say, could you coach me, right? So we might have gone to them and we're talking about a problem or situation or a particular file or a customer, whatever it is. And the conversation is going around. So, you know, what do you want to do? What do you need to achieve? And so it's going kind of in a coaching mindset of helping the individual become more familiar with the situation and what some of the options are. And then there reach a point in that conversation when they need a piece of information. Maybe they were thinking differently. Maybe they were using the wrong policy. Maybe they were doing something that wasn't appropriate or for this situation. So we have to kind of zip over during that coaching session to go over and telling, say, well, listen, I hear your idea that getting in a car and driving 100 kilometers an hour is the right thing to do because it gets you there faster. But I need to go over here and tell you that driving 100 kilometers an hour into a wall is quite a deadly, right? And so, silly example, but I hope you understand that there are moments when you kind of have to bring them aware and say, so how could you run the car at 100 kilometers an hour and not hit the wall? How could we change your action plan so accordingly, right? So we really talk about whether you start in coaching and you got to go to managing and go back, or you start in managing and you got to go to coaching and back. All of those things really work well, right? The cookie has a bad taste. I just saw Carmen's comment in the chat there. Yes, the cookie has a bad taste feeling.
It does. Sure does.
Question for you. Let's get this chat thing working then, because you've got and Jeanette, I know you're onto it too. You're watching it, but let's get an example. Let's get a situation. Where do you think? Where does the audience think that this manager-coach dance? What kind of conversation or situation does this manager-coach dance thing? Where do you think it would really fly well? Give me a conversation where, you know, a purposeful conversation really, really could be used. Going back between asking and telling. Any thoughts? You can chump it into the old chat if you want. I've got one. Hey, Pablo, do you want to play a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And while we get into the chat, this came last week actually with one of the folks. He was dealing with an employee who wanted a raise. So I'll tell you what, let's you be the employee that wants a raise, right? You've been working very hard. You're a good employee. You want a raise. But here's the catch, Pablo. You really don't want to work any harder. But you want the raise, you want the promotion, but you don't really want to work harder. So you let's say you've come into my office and you raised the question about about your career advancement or what it was, and so just play that role if you want. So your employee wants the money, but you don't really want to work hard. And I'm obviously a manager that wants to give you the money, but I need you to do more work, right? So we have a kind of a different opinions. And so I could say at the beginning saying, tough love, you got to do it, Pablo, pick up, once a month, do the work. But that really doesn't help our relationship very well, nor would it answer the problem.
Okay.
So knock on my door. Let's just play with this for a sec.
Okay, Merv, do you have a minute?
Yeah, please.
So Merv, I've come to you because, as you know, I've been working for you now for 5 years or so, days here and there. But you know what? I really feel it's time for a bit of a higher raise. As you know, I work very hard, and I feel my time and my effort is worth a bit more.
All right. Well, I value your opinion. Absolutely. And so tell me more about how you would justify a change in raise or a change in salary.
Well, there's been the, off and on raise, nothing huge. And as you know, my partner, Joe here, or my colleague, Joe, he just got a big raise. And so I feel, and he came after me, and I feel I've been here longer, and I feel I deserve, or I'm not being respected or respectful of my seniority, and that's what I'm seeing.
Okay, cool. Would this be a good time to kind of share with you kind of what the criteria for that job promotion might look like? Would that work with you?
Sure.
So when we're looking for folks that are moving from your level to a more senior level, we're going to look at really 3 criteria. And the first criteria is the amount of new business that people are brought in. And what we're saying is that people in the more senior role are really, we're expecting to bring over more than $6 million a year is kind of that target. You're familiar with that. You're cruising really well. You're sitting about 4.5. So you're doing, well along that way, but you're not quite there at that criteria. So our expectation of anyone in that senior management role is to be able to drive that revenue, including the customer satisfaction piece that goes along with that. And so the targets very well. And so what that would mean is that the kind of satisfaction you are currently achieving needs to be maintained consistently year after year. And a real big key that I think is your opportunity to step into here. One of the things that we look for senior folks is that they're able to train and teach and lead others. Now, that's the criteria that we kind of look for. Where are you in terms of, of your ability to meet that criteria?
Well, I think I believe that I'm in line with others, and my contract was older. When I signed my contract, criteria have changed since then. So, in my mind, I feel I'm just as deserving as anybody else.
Cool. So this is not a moment to coach. So I'm going to go back to manager mode, and I'm going, well, that's great. We're going to factor in all those things, but I really like to get very clear with what your action plan could be that would allow you to do one of two things: drive additional revenue and be seen as a leader and really demonstrate those leadership skills over time. Those are two big components that we look for. And I'm not fully seeing you exploit those yet. So what would it take? Let's focus on the leadership. Which one would you want to focus on first? The leadership skills or the revenue targets? Which one would you like to focus on first?
I think leadership skills, and as you're saying this, Merv, I think what's actually happening is, that I feel I'm having some issues to drive those performances to be better.
Okay. Well, maybe that's what we need to focus on. Is that something you'd like to get better at?
100%.
So what if you and I focused on that and we were able to really crank up those leadership skills? You can decide how much more you want to contribute from a revenue-driven driving perspective. And that we continue to talk about our raise, but we get those two things focused on first. Would that be an outcome that you could accept?
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's pause our little scenario. Congratulations, you didn't cost me a dime, so I appreciate that very much. All right, so I don't know if that was a really wonderful scenario or not, team, but I really just wanted to demonstrate the difference that, sometimes you got to tell them, and when you move over to coaching mode, they're not giving it to you. So you got to go back and you got to tell them again, and you move back and forth until such a point you get to the agreement of a good next step, right? And so that's how that manager coach stance would work.
Hey, Merv, I just wanted to pop in. There's a couple of comments in the chat there from Ed. How about the employee who is not transparent in their work, holds information to make sure they are either never wrong or have a competitive advantage on the team?
Wow, so that's loaded. That's loaded. I love it. Let's kind of narrow those down a little bit. One of the things that the manager coach does really well, and this is a phrase that I love using all the time. You saw me use it earlier. It's my expectation of anyone in your job role. So my expectation of anyone in your job role is that you're able to share information with others as they need it. And so, so then I would talk to this individual, and I would say, so is this a good time to get into that conversation? Is this a good time to really understand kind of what's going on for you? And if they say yes, then I say, well, okay, here's the deal. My notice is, and I'd have to be very, very specific with this feedback. My notice was, last Tuesday, you were able to, you received, I have to make this up, you received the engineering specs back from the design team. And what I noticed is that the design team has not received those specs yet. Now, I'm not sure why that is, and because I want to have a conversation around that. But my expectation is that when those design specs come in, they get shared with the other departments so that they too can do work. Can you tell me more about that particular situation? What was happening and why those design specs still have not been shared? What's going on for you, right? And so again, I'm going back and forth, but I'm really declaring what I want and then inviting them. And I've really tried, and I hope my language has proven it, I've really tried to avoid being judgmental, saying you're hanging on information. You're being, insincere. You're being, an information hog. I simply spell out the specific observed information, right? And I was able to observe that because I, see email trails or whatever, right? So that'd be a scenario. That's a really good, and you've got a bunch in there, Ed. So that was a really good one. Yeah. How about this one? Oh, Pablo, I'm going to pick on you again, since it's you and I having a dialogue anyways. you are my top sales guy, right? So, you know, that conversation we just had, you know, a couple of years ago when you were just kind of doing okay sales and you weren't leading very much. Well, a fire got lit under your butt and you got promoted and you're amazing. You rock it. You're my top sales guy now. Okay. So you're my top sales guy now. We're several years later. And my job is to, you know, congratulate you on bringing this latest deal in. So do you want to be that guy? Want to be that top sales guy?
Sure.
All right. So I'm just going to use the model. That's all I'm going to do. Let me just show everybody the model so we're on the same page. And so for every style of feedback, I always ask permission. Ask permission, make sure that I'm not wasting my time. So Pablo, listen, I really want to give you some feedback about the recent sales quota. Is now a good time to chat to you about it?
Sure, Merv. Let's do it.
Well, I got to tell you, I looked at the report today and I was thrilled. What I noticed was that you really closed that, you know, extra $1 million contract last night. And I do know that the amount of effort that you took in terms of the being accurate in the bid, doing a variety of extra above all work, really paid off. And I want to really congratulate you on that. I'm curious though, what is it about you that allows you to sell so well?
Well, thanks, Merv. First, thank you for the congratulations. But Merv, I think it's just, you know, I like working for the organization. I feel I am valued. I feel heard, and I just enjoy what I'm doing.
Well, I tell you, we really enjoy what you're doing. I mean, the impact obviously is that you contribute strongly to the business. My question of you though is, how could you take this to the next level?
How could I take this to the next level? Well, the answer is the question is a little loaded, I should say, because, you know, there's this piece that I really enjoy, the money side of things. That's a great reward. But there's also the side of family where I've got to balance my life, work, you know, kind of situation.
Yeah.
So to take it to the next level, it would mean that I would have to spend less time with my family, and I'm not sure I want to do that.
Yeah, I'm not so sure I'd want you to do that either. Is there something else you could do though? I mean, I don't know. I'm just being curious because you're very good at it, and you know, we don't want you to zap more family time. And I'm not fishing for anything, but I just wanted to kind of brainstorm with you to see, you know, is there a way that we could just crank this a little bit more, you and I?
Yeah, it's a good idea. And what I would need to do is maybe come up with a plan that we can discuss. One thing that comes to mind is maybe getting some more admin support to potentially be able to free up some time and focus more on the sales side of things.
Okay. So I'll go back to management mode. That's great. So is that something that you'd be willing to commit to, kind of working up this idea of what other support you might need? And then let's discuss that. Is that something you'd like to do?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I like this because just think, if you could spend the same amount of time with your family or more and be equally successful or more, that's a real win-win. And I would love to be there to support you doing that. Is that something that we'd like to go forward with?
100%. That would be great.
All right, so let's pause our silly role play for a moment. And so I'm going to, give to questions and for the audience and so forth. And I know, Stephanie, we've got some things, but I hope that you've been able to see that at the end of the day, at the end of the conversation, the old style manager usually walks away with some to-dos. The new style manager makes sure that they only walk away with what's appropriate. And I'll tell you a very quick personal story about that. How I learned about personal conversations in a personal way. I have daughters, as many of you know, and my daughters would come to me with their essay, with their work, and say, "Dad, could you look at this for me?" And I go, "Oh yeah, no problem." And I'd get the essay, and I get my little red pen. It's literally red, and I would write all over it, and I would give this back to my girls, And because and that would take me an hour, but I would change the sentence structure and everything. I give it back to my oldest daughter, would go, oh, thanks, Dad. He's so crestfallen. And I was doing all the work. Then I realized about purposeful conversation. So when my daughter now comes to me with this essay and says, Dad, could you proof it? I say, absolutely, I'd love to proof it. What specifically would you like back? What specifically would you like back in terms of feedback around this essay? And she'll say, well, I just need you to kind of make sure that the ideas make sense. I'll do the grammar and stuff later, but I just want to make sure it sticks together from a logic perspective. Oh, heck, I can do that in 5 minutes. I don't need an hour to rewrite it for you. And so all of a sudden I realized I was taking on everyone's work because I was a nice guy. I was trying to help. I was trying to do all the right darn things, but all I was doing was getting in the way, slowing work down. And that's very true with my kids, as is true. And so, when the scenario goes that when I rewrite my girl's essay and send it to them and they don't get an A or a B or whatever they were expecting, then who's accountable? Me. But when I give them the feedback they want and they have to rewrite it and submit it, who's accountable? They are. And that's what we're really after here, is we want to give the keys to the problem owner. And 9 times out of 10, you might be the problem overseer, but you're not likely to be the owner, because that's what we pay our people to do. We pay our people to own it and take care of it. Our job is to bring awareness and rules and regulations together so that they can do a powerful job. So it is all about accountability at the end of the day, right? So purposeful conversations. I love this thing. I love the power it does for managers. I love how it enlivens organizations. We've done this from multiple levels and seen a tremendous difference in the way in which people are communicated to and business results, bottom line business results. One statistic, by the way, and I'll throw it out to you. One statistic is it saved their managers 25% of their time during the day by using these skills. And that was pretty powerful. Anyway, so again, we go into organizations to do that. I'm trying to convince Pablo, if you're willing, Pablo, to kind of put on a public course in the fall. So maybe we could get some of these folks to the course. But it's also, some of the folks online may be coaches already, and maybe they want to get trained and teach on this stuff. And so this is the cool part, is that we're now bringing that out to people so that they can use it in their own accounts without us being involved. So lots of ways to get to it. But thank you, because that's kind of the end of my dance, and about time for some questions, and maybe Stephanie, about time for you to kind of pipe up. What do you think?
I'm going to step in front of Stephanie for just a second.
Yeah.
There's a question here from Carmen Mason, a little bit about how purposeful conversations and 555 overlap, if at all.
Oh, huge overlap. Absolutely. In fact, the engine for purposeful conversations is the 555, right? So because we know that works. We know that those develop in people very sound discriminating skills, powerful listening skills, powerful questioning skills, following a process for conversation. So it is literally built with the 555. The shift, though, is the way it's applied. In the 555 program that we traditionally run for coaches, we apply it to the coaching world. Well, now we apply 555 to the business world, or to the consultants world, or the sales world, right? And that's the real shift. So so the engine's the same, the body work is a little bit different. Yeah. So it looks, sleeker and sexier maybe, but nonetheless, it's still the same gem that's underneath. Yeah. Good question.
She was also asking if you could share about how long the course is, number of hours, for example.
Yeah. So it's really about the same length as the 555. So we deliver this program in 6 to 8 weeks, 6 to 8 90-minute modules, depending on what the organization wants to deliver. Or it can be done over a 2 or a day and a half period. Yeah, so it's really the same size. The biggest shift is the context that we're presenting in. Yeah.
I just wanted to check in with Judy too. Judy Mason's been back and forth a little in the chat, just in regards to the application of it from a leadership perspective. So just making sure that she was answered there. She was talking about applying it from a leadership, team, innovation, navigation, and activation model to deliver high-level sustainable outcomes, and how you would do that.
Yes, yes. Well, again, this is the 5 steps are a process to have a conversation. It's a process. I use this in private practice. Coaching organizations, bringing new strategy to the organizations, bringing new tactics to the organization. We still follow the 5 steps in terms of communicating the organization. So it's, the 5 steps are the process which to carry information along. And so, every leader needs that ability to be succinct in their conversation. Every leader needs that ability to really listen to their people and the marketplace and their bosses and the stakeholders. And I don't know if we really teach them that in Leadership 101. I kind of think they missed that. I do know the group of lawyers that I had the other day didn't get it. So I'm sure there's a lot of other professions that could really value from a leadership perspective to expand to those much more dynamic skills, right?
Great, thank you. And I will step back for Stephanie to step in.
Thank you, Jeanette, and thank you, Merv and Pablo. I really appreciate you guys walking us through basically this topic. It's been an insightful journey, learning more about how this program is so needed in today's workforce. I'm just gonna unspotlight you guys. So hopefully everybody can see me.
Yep.
You can see me? Okay, good, because I can't see myself, which is probably good. So I just wanted to share a little bit more about Coaching Out of the Box. This is an overview of who our students are and who's using Coaching Out of the Box. As you can see, we are all over the world, working with over 33,000 people from 38 countries in various industries and job roles. We have something for everyone. If you could switch to the next slide, please. And where do you see yourself? We have many programs, regardless of where you are in your coaching journey. If you could click to the next, there's, there we go, it's all the way across. So there's all different programs for everyone. We have tons of different solutions. We are happy to speak with you about our programs or coaching in general at any time. Our calendar link will be in the slide deck shared with the webinar recording, and Jeanette will pop it in the chat as well for us. You could switch to the next slide, please. So our upcoming programs, we have a bunch of programs starting soon. Our next Fast Track starts in July. It's a great way to get all your coach training done in one easy, quick solution, and then a bunch of other courses. We also have our diversity course, which will be running again in the fall for those of you that are already coaching and looking to add that to your tool belt. And before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask if anybody else had any further questions, or if there was anything else anybody else wanted to ask in the chat. And so I guess as we continue to kind of work our way towards the end of the webinar, I just wanted to ask, what are you walking away with as a result of today's webinar?
What a great coaching question, right? Yeah, now a good coach doesn't let you off the hook. So a good coach is expecting, how many people we got floating around here? A lot of people. So in the chat, folks, what did you walk away with? Did we excite you? Were you bored? Is there something that maybe I said makes sense? Yeah, like let's have you take ownership of what you learned. What'd you take away with? Yeah. So great ways to use the 555 and manager mode, using conversation as a leader. Yes, that's what we want to do. We want to evolve this thing beyond the little world of coaching into the dynamic world of human being. Yes. Ah, Jane, very nice. Good. It's a tool. Yes, you feel free to feel free to use this tool with whoever you like. Come visit us. We'll give you more information because there's a lot more in the course than what I've shared so far.
So as we continue to wrap up today's session, there's lots of great comments that are coming in the chat. I just want to thank everybody for joining us today, and a huge thank you to Pablo and Merv for facilitating the conversation and giving us more information about purposeful conversations. Also, Jeanette, thank you so much for your support, and our whole team at Coaching Out of the Box. It doesn't take one person to run these, it takes our whole team to put these webinars on for everybody. And I just wanted to let you know that our next webinar will be running next month. The registration will be open shortly. It is how to grow your coaching business using network marketing. And I guess if we have any other further comments or questions in the chat, we'll leave the webinar open for a few more minutes. Everybody can have their closing remarks, and then we will stop the recording shortly.
Thanks, folks.
Yes, thanks everybody. And yes, we are exploring the option of opening up Purposeful Conversations as not just directed to organizations, but also to the public in general. So that's what we're going to discuss here shortly, right, Merv?
Yes, sir. We got the hint. Yay.
Thanks everybody. Really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. And Merv, you're a ball of energy and experience and knowledge. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Cheers. It's been fun.
So much.
Thank you.
So I'm going to stop the recording.